Yo, 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 it's Nova. What up, guys? I'm here for another video. Today we're going to be talking about Black Blades. So, in the story of One Piece, the sword is very significant. We've got a lot of characters that use the sword or a blade. And one of our most significant characters in the show that we see using a sword is our ex-Pirate King, Gold D. Roger, okay? Gold D. Roger used a sword. Whitebeard used a blade. Those are our definitively two most strongest characters we've seen in the entirety of the show, and they either use a blade or a sword. But with all of these users of the blade or the sword, I mean, shoot, we've got Hakuba? Yeah, Hakuba. We've got Hakuba, we've got Brook that use swords. I mean, Law uses a sword. We've got multitudes of characters that use swords. But through the thick, through the bushes, peeping out to the neighbor's yard, we see two prominent men, and those are the only two prominent men in the entirety of this manga, this show, that have attained black blades. Okay, and they're not even the strongest in the verse, because we've had Gold D. Roger, Edward Newgate using a sword or a blade, you know, Whitebeard's Naginata, Gold D. Roger's ace, his sword. They both used like freaking island busting attacks with respective weapons. So why were only two characters in this show? Why have only two of them used a black blade, or been able to reach the level of the black blade? And those two characters are, hey, what's up, man? Our former marine hunter Drakeal Mihawk, or Drakeal Hawkeye Mihawk, and our late Zoro's granddaddy, his granddaddy, Shimotsuki Ryuma. Okay, and those are the only two characters we've seen in the show with black blades. So I want to say, why haven't any other characters achieved this level, achieved this feat of the black blade? Okay, we can say that Roger wasn't 100% a swordsman. Okay, we can say he used some other attacks that we don't know, maybe, blah, 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 but every time we've seen him, he's had a sword out. So if we make that argument that Roger wasn't a swordsman, we have to go and look and find the swordsmen of the story, alright? So we got the, what was it, the flower sword Vista of the Whitebeard pirates. Used a sword, was devoted to the sword for a multitude of years, from whenever he joined the crew, even before that. We don't really get too much about Vista before he joined the crew, or even when he joined the crew. We just know he's a swordsman. We see him younger in one of the flashbacks with like Whitey Bay was on the ship, younger Marco, Jesus Christ, younger Marco. So yeah, so we've got Vista of the Whitebeard Pirates, and then Shiryu of the Rain, who has been an Impel Down for a multitude of years, has been feeding the bloodlust of his sword. So I honestly think Shiryu's recognized the will of his sword, and that's just to cut people down. Just bloodlust, blood, I need it, blood cutting down. So why hasn't he reached it? He's devoted, like the latter, he's devoted to the sword. So in my opinion, the sword's wills are on par with like the will of a devil fruit, okay? So we see like devil fruits have wills, more strongly seen in zone fruits, that the will of the fruit will usually kind of influence the will of the user. So like Lucci with his leopard zone, he's got a little bit more bloodlust in that with that zone fruit because of its carnivorous attributes. So boom. But I think they're fairly similar with how they awaken, because to awaken your fruit, your devil fruit, you have to gain complete mastery and complete understanding of that said devil fruit. And I think it's the same for swords. You have to recognize or realize the will of the sword and then master that sword. So going back to devil fruits, I mean, recently in the manga and the anime, we see Luffy, Law, and Kid awakening their respective abilities. But then on the other side, we see the Zoro and King fight, where Zoro is trying to find the identity of his sword, trying to recognize the will of his sword, so he can utilize its full ability, full strength, so he can pour his haki into the sword and utilize its full capabilities. Okay, we see that in his fight with King, starting to realize Enma's, I don't want to say purpose, but I guess Enma's will onto, and taking it from the chapters, me guessing Enma's will is just to overcome, to overpower, all right, to be better than whoever you're facing. Okay, so I think that's really the will of Enma. I'm starting to realize the will of Enma, and him to master Enma is slowly bringing Enma to the Black Blade. But then we get to his other sword, the Wado Ichimonji, because we know that the old man in the Shimotsuki village that Zoro came from, that he told Zoro that the Wado that he had made a Zoro kind of put 2 and 2 together, you know, good for Zoro, you know, an egghead. He definitely was not able to put 2 and 2 together with the Seraphim, but whatever, we don't talk about that. But he put 2 and 2 together because the old man Shimotsuki said that in his earlier years he created a sword that was a monster, and that this was the last sword that he created, said being the Wado Ichimonji. And then so him being in Wano, him realizing that Enma was the sword that he was talking about, so he realized that Wado Ichimonji and Enma were made by the same person. So then me theorizing in my headcanon all the time, that Enma and Wado Ichimonji were made by the same person, we see the caliber of sword that the Enma is on. That makes me get to thinking that the Wado Ichimonji is kind of on the same caliber, and just Zoro hasn't figured out the will of Wado Ichimonji, hasn't pulled it out of him, or has gained mastery over the Wado Ichimonji. So then the haki use and the training for him to utilize Enma will gateway him into being able to awaken Wado Ichimonji as a Black Blade, finding out the will of the sword and continuing to master the sword itself. The Enma requires a ridiculous amount of haki to be utilized. It'll pull it out of you. It pulls it out of Zoro almost every time he uses it. Maybe the Wado Ichimonji might have to take that much haki, or, you know, like kind of on the same level where the output, or not even on the same level because he hasn't been able to utilize it. Maybe it's even on a greater level than the Enma, because when Shimotsuki, or old man Shimotsuki, I forgot his name, forgot what they said his name was, when they talked to him, he said he made his masterpiece in his earlier years. But that kind of doesn't sit right with me, because if you make a masterpiece, you can kind of gauge everything off of that, okay, and kind of improve your methods after making this masterpiece. So you see how you made this, make the next one the same or better in that method. So later, going on the years, old man Shimotsuki should have gotten better at making swords. So I'm thinking that the will of the Wado Ichimonji has not been recognized yet. It's not close to being mastered. Zoro's got to gateway Enma into the Wado Ichimonji. Okay, so maybe it requires a ridiculous amount of haki, but that would gateway me into another theory talking about black blades, that if it requires a ridiculous amount of haki, maybe the haki that's required to make a blade into a black blade is Conqueror's haki, because we know Conqueror's haki is, so if I'm using Conqueror's haki, I'm exerting my will onto you, and my will overpower your will, which would make you either knock out, go comatose, or you're extremely afraid of me. So the sword, so we all know the sword has their own wills. We've heard about this. I forgot in which chapter they talk about this, but they talk about swords having their own will, and that you have to recognize the sword's will to be able to utilize the sword at 100%. So maybe with your Conqueror's haki, your own will, putting Conqueror's haki onto a blade is forcing your will onto the blade. So which over time, after you forced your will over and over and over again onto this sword, it then coats in black Conqueror's haki, because that is now your will. So whatever will the sword had before is completely gone. Now it's subdued to your will. And then so that also brings me back to how the devil fruit and the swords are linked, because if the will of the object overpowers the will of the being, the will of the object goes into the being, basically, and it kind of morphs them. It kind of changes their idealisticness, I guess. So say, what would I use an example as for here? Let's see, Big Mom's fruit, the soul fruit. She likes to control people. She needs people to move to her will, but maybe that's not the will of Big Mom. Maybe that's the will of the soul fruit, to control souls and control people. Something like that. So what would happen if the blade's will controls the person? Then we go back to someone like Shiryu of the Rain, whose blade is looking for nothing but bloodlust, nothing but, obviously blood. So once you overpower that will with your own, then whatever you can do with that sword after it becomes a black blade will be like inimaginable. Like the feats you can accomplish, the feats Mihawk's accomplished, the feats that Ryuma's accomplished. I've heard some theories out there that the dragon that Ryuma actually slayed maybe wasn't an actual dragon. Maybe it was a celestial dragon riding on top of, what was it, Iranos? Something like that, yeah. I heard some theory. I forgot who said that. Dang, who said that? I forgot who it was. But shout out to them. Even though you probably won't see this. I don't know who you were. But, so yeah. And then to be able to utilize, or even to get to the realm of stepping into the Black Blade room, you step into the room, or you open the door, but it's a force field. You can't get in. Like you can't get in the door. So what are the prerequisites you have to be able to even get your foot in the door? You gotta be a swordsman, obviously. You gotta know haki, obviously. And the one prerequisite that you can't control, you have to have Conqueror's haki. Okay? Shimotsuki Ryuma. He's Zoro's granddaddy. He obviously had Conqueror's haki. Come on. You can't compete. You cannot compete with Shanks if you don't have Conqueror's haki. We literally seen him Bluetooth Conqueror's haki to Green Bull. We see him using a disgusting divine departure against Kid. Destroyed his ship and his whole crew. 2 supernovas out one move, like, boom. And like the fact that Odin, Kozuki Odin didn't even have a black blade yet is crazy. But I think why characters like that, why like characters like Odin haven't had, or Vista haven't had black blades yet, is because to be able to have a black blade, you have to be a king, okay? You have to have that. So you know how Zoro fighting King in the recent anime episode, he's like, oh, you're trying to be a king. You have to be a king. You can't, or you have to be a king of your respected like slot, okay? So I know obviously Luffy's gonna be the king of the pirates, but Zoro is the king of hell. Okay, we don't see Vista, we don't see Odin taking up an epithet as the king, okay? I mean, this guy here is the greatest swordsman of them all. So he's the king of swordsmen, basically. Like the title, you know, it's it's iffy with the titles, but to embody that title is what Mihawk is. He's the greatest swordsman in the world. And Zoro, on achieving that, will then, I think, achieve his Black Blade. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let me know if I sound crazy or I'm hitting it right on the head like the rest of you guys are. Give me some comments, give me a like, subscribe. That would be great. I do this because none of my friends either read or watch anime or manga. I'm on a boat. I'm Brooke right now. I'm on a boat alone. Got no one to talk to. So please leave me a comment. I would love to talk to you guys. But that's that. I hope you guys enjoyed, and that's Nova.